I still remember the day I hit rock bottom. It was a chilly winter evening, and I was sitting in my car, counting the few pennies I had left in my pocket. The same car that was once a symbol of freedom and adventure had become my home, my refuge, and my prison. I had been evicted from my apartment by a landlord who didn't care that I had nowhere else to go. The memory of his cold, calculating eyes still haunts me to this day. As I sat there trying to make sense of my life, I couldn't help but wonder how I had ended up like this. I had always been a hard worker, always striving to make ends meet, but somehow it was never enough. The bills kept piling up and the debt collectors kept calling. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of despair with no lifeline in sight. But as I sat there, something inside of me shifted. I realized that I had a choice to make. I could give up or I could fight back. I could let my circumstances define me or I could rise above them. It was a spark of determination that ignited within me, a flame that would burn brighter with each passing day. I started to think about my life, about the choices I had made, and the opportunities I had missed. I thought about the people who had wronged me, like my landlord, who had taken advantage of my vulnerability. And I thought about the people who had helped me, like the strangers who had offered me a kind word or a warm meal. As I sat there, surrounded by the darkness of my car, I made a promise to myself. I would not let my circumstances define me. I would rise above them. I would find a way to turn my life around, to make a better future for myself. And I would make sure that no one else would ever have to go through what I had gone through. Little did I know that spark of determination would be the start of an incredible journey, one that would take me from the depths of homelessness to the heights of success. And it would all start with a single step, a step that would change my life forever. I still remember the night I slept in my car, counting the few pennies I had left, trying to figure out how I was going to get back on my feet. But that was the turning point, the moment I knew I had to make a change. I couldn't keep living like that, constantly struggling to make ends meet. So I started taking small steps towards recovery. I began to read books on personal finance, trying to educate myself on how to manage my money better. I downloaded budgeting apps on my phone and started tracking my expenses. I made a plan to build a safety net, to save enough money so that I wouldn't have to go through that again. It wasn't easy, of course. There were many nights when I had to fight the urge to splurge on something I didn't need, just because I was feeling down. But I kept my eyes on the prize, reminding myself that this was all part of the journey to a better life. As I worked on my financial literacy, I began to see the world in a different light. I realized that money wasn't the enemy, but a tool that could be used to achieve my goals. I started to feel more in control of my life, more confident in my ability to take care of myself. But even as I made progress, I knew that I couldn't stay in my current living situation. The car was not a long-term solution, and I needed to find a way to get back into a real home. So I started to make plans, to look for apartments and neighborhoods that I could afford. It was a daunting task, but I was determined to succeed. I spent hours scouring the internet looking for the perfect place. I visited apartments, talked to landlords, and calculated the costs. And then one day I found a small studio apartment that was within my budget. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. As I signed the lease and moved in, I felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. I had done it, I had taken the first step towards a better life. And as I looked around my new apartment, I knew that this was just the beginning. I had a long way to go, but I was ready for the challenge. But little did I know, the real challenge was yet to come. The same landlord who had evicted me from my previous apartment was about to become a major player in my life again. And this time, the stakes were higher than ever. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, I started to feel a sense of momentum building in my life. The struggle was still real, but it no longer felt like I was drowning in a sea of despair. I had finally found a way to stay afloat, and with each passing day, I was getting closer to reaching the shore. I remember the first time I looked at my savings account and saw that I had managed to scrape together $1,000. It was a milestone, and I felt an overwhelming sense of pride and accomplishment. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt like I had a safety net, a cushion to fall back on in case things went wrong. But I didn't stop there. I knew that I had to keep pushing forward to keep building momentum. So I started to look for ways to increase my income. I took on a side hustle, freelancing in my spare time, and I started to invest in my future. I read books on entrepreneurship, attended seminars, and even took online courses to learn new skills. It was a steep learning curve, but I was determined to succeed. and slowly but surely my hard work started to pay off. I landed bigger and better clients, and my income started to grow. I was finally able to move out of my car and into a small apartment, and I even started to save up for a down payment on a house. As my financial situation improved, I started to see a glimmer of hope on the horizon. I began to envision a better life for myself, a life where I wasn't constantly stressing about money, where I could afford to take a vacation or go out to dinner without worrying about the cost. It was a tantalizing prospect, and it motivated me to keep pushing forward. I started to see that my struggles, as difficult as they had been, were not in vain. They had taught me the value of perseverance, of hard work, and of determination. And as I looked to the future, I knew that I was ready for whatever came next. I was no longer the same person who had been evicted from my apartment, who had been forced to sleep in my car. I was stronger, wiser, and more resilient, and I was just getting started. As I stood in the grand lobby of my luxury apartments, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. The marble floors, the crystal chandeliers, and the sleek glass walls all seemed to gleam with a sense of vindication. I had come a long way from the days of sleeping in my car, counting pennies to make ends meet. I thought back to the day I was evicted from my small apartment, the feeling of desperation and hopelessness that had washed over me. But I had refused to give up. I had worked tirelessly, pouring every ounce of energy into rebuilding my life. And now here I was, the owner of this stunning building, with tenants clamoring to rent out the luxurious units. But little did I know, fate had a surprise in store for me. As I was reviewing the applications for the remaining units, one name caught my eye. It was a name I had never thought I'd see again, a name that brought back a mix of emotions, anger, resentment, and a hint of satisfaction. It was the name of my former landlord, the one who had evicted me from my home all those years ago. I couldn't believe it. The man who had once held so much power over me, who had left me feeling helpless and defeated, was now applying to rent one of my apartments. I felt a sense of irony, of poetic justice. The tables had indeed turned. As I delved deeper into his application, I discovered that he was facing financial difficulties. His business had failed, and he was struggling to make ends meet. I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy, despite the history between us. I decided to approve his application, and we scheduled a meeting to discuss the terms of the lease. The day of the meeting arrived, and I was nervous. I didn't know what to expect, how he would react to our reversed roles. But as he walked into the lobby, looking worn and weary, I saw something in his eyes that gave me pause. It was a glimmer of recognition, of acknowledgement. He knew that I was the one who had been wronged all those years ago, and he was willing to swallow his pride and accept my help. I showed him to the unit, a beautiful two-bedroom apartment with a stunning view of the city. He looked around, taking in the luxurious finishes and the modern appliances. I could see the envy in his eyes, the regret for the way things had turned out. As we signed the lease, I couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. The chapter of my life that had been marked by struggle and hardship was finally coming to a close. I was starting a new chapter, one of success and prosperity. And my former landlord, the man who had once held so much power over me, was now a part of it, a reminder of how far I had come. But little did I know, this was only the beginning of a new and unexpected journey, one that would challenge me in ways I never thought possible. I still remember the day my former landlord, Mr. Johnson, evicted me from his apartment complex. The feeling of helplessness and desperation that consumed me as I was forced to sleep in my car, counting pennies to make ends meet. But life has a way of turning the tables, and now, as fate would have it, Mr. Johnson is a tenant in one of my luxury apartments. As I sit in my office, staring at the stack of rent checks in front of me, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. The man who once held so much power over me, who once made me feel so small and insignificant, was now paying me to live in one of my properties. It was a strange feeling, one that I wasn't quite sure how to process. But as I delved deeper into my thoughts, I began to grapple with the moral implications of my newfound power. Was it right to take pleasure in Mr. Johnson's misfortune? Should I be gloating over the fact that he was now in a position of vulnerability, just as I once was? Or should I be taking the high road, treating him with kindness and respect, despite the way he treated me in the past? These were questions that I struggled to answer, and as I sat there, weighing my options, I couldn't help but think about the role of fortune and revenge in my life. Had I simply been lucky, or was this some kind of cosmic justice at play? And what did it say about me, as a person, if I chose to exact revenge on someone who had wronged me in the past? As I pondered these questions, I knew that I had to make a decision. I could choose to be the bigger person, to treat Mr. Johnson with dignity and respect, despite the way he treated me. Or I could choose to indulge in my desire for revenge, to make him pay for the way he wronged me. Either way, I knew that my decision would have consequences, not just for Mr. Johnson, but for me as well. And as I sat there, staring at the stack of rent checks in front of me, I knew that I had to make a choice that I could live with. But little did I know, my decision would set off a chain of events that would change everything. I still remember the day my former landlord, Mr. Johnson, walked into my office to sign the lease for one of my luxury apartments. It was a surreal moment, to say the least. The man who had once evicted me from my home, leaving me to sleep in my car and count pennies, was now standing in front of me, asking to rent a place to live. As I looked at him, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. A part of me wanted to gloat, to rub it in his face that I had come out on top. But another part of me, the part that had grown and matured over the years, knew that I had to be professional. I had to treat him with the same respect and dignity that I would offer to any other tenant. As we went over the lease agreement, I could sense a shift in the dynamic between us. Mr. Johnson was no longer the authority figure, the one with the power to dictate my fate. Now I was the one in control, and he was just a tenant, subject to the rules and regulations of my building. It was a strange feeling, having the upper hand. I had to balance my personal feelings with my responsibilities as a landlord. I couldn't let my past experiences cloud my judgment or influence my decisions. I had to be fair and impartial, even when it came to someone who had once wronged me. As the days went by, I noticed that Mr. Johnson was adapting to his new situation. He was paying his rent on time, and he was respectful of the other tenants in the building. He even started to participate in the community events that I organized, and I could see him slowly becoming a part of the community. But despite the changes, I could still sense a lingering tension between us. It was as if we were both waiting for the other shoe to drop, for something to go wrong. I knew that I had to be patient, to let time heal the wounds of the past, and I was determined to make it work, to prove to myself and to Mr. Johnson that we could coexist, even thrive in this new dynamic. As I looked at him, I realized that our roles had not only changed, but our perspectives had also shifted. We were no longer just landlord and tenant. We were two people trying to make the best of a complicated situation. And I couldn't help but wonder, what lessons would we learn from this new chapter in our lives? Would we grow as individuals, or would we remain stuck in the past? Only time would tell. As I stood in my office, gazing out the window at the sprawling city below, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. The luxury apartments I had built were a far cry from the cramped, dingy rooms I had once called home. I thought back to those days, sleeping in my car, counting pennies, and wondering how I would make ends meet. It was a life I never wanted to return to, but it was also a life that had taught me the value of perseverance and hard work. My mind wandered to my former landlord, the one who had evicted me from my apartment all those years ago. It was ironic that he was now one of my tenants, paying rent to live in the very building I had created. I had often wondered how he felt about our role reversal, but I had never asked. I assumed he was probably bitter, resentful of the fact that I had succeeded where he had failed. But as I watched him walk into the lobby, his head held high, I saw something different. I saw a man who was struggling to come to terms with his past, who was grappling with the consequences of his actions. He had always been a hard man, unyielding and unforgiving, but now he seemed softer, more introspective. I realized that my success had not only changed my life, but it had also changed his. He had been forced to confront the impact of his actions, to consider the harm he had caused to others. And as he looked at me, I saw a glimmer of recognition, a sense of understanding that he had been wrong to treat me the way he had. In that moment, I felt a sense of forgiveness wash over me. I had held onto my anger and resentment for so long, but now I saw that it was time to let go. I realized that my former landlord was not the same man he had been all those years ago. He had grown just as I had, and he was struggling to make amends for his past mistakes. As I watched him walk away, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I knew that I still had a long way to go, that there were still challenges ahead, but I was ready. I was ready to face whatever came next, armed with the knowledge and insights I had gained from my experiences. And as I turned back to my office, I couldn't help but wonder what the future held. How would my newfound understanding of myself and others impact my relationships and decisions moving forward? Only time would tell, But for now, I was content to bask in the glow of my success, and to revel in the knowledge that I had truly grown. As I stood in the grand foyer of my latest luxury apartment complex, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. The marble floors sparkled beneath my feet, and the sound of laughter and music drifted from the rooftop pool above. It was a far cry from the days when I slept in my car, counting pennies and wondering how I'd make ends meet. My former landlord, the same man who had evicted me from my apartment all those years ago, now stood beside me, a mix of emotions on his face. He had hit rock bottom after our last encounter, but I had given him a chance to rebuild his life, to start anew. And he had taken it, working hard to regain his footing and find new opportunities. "Who would have thought, huh?" he said, his voice filled with a mix of sadness and gratitude. "That I'd be paying rent to you of all people." I smiled, feeling a sense of closure wash over me. "Life is full of surprises," I replied, "but I'm just glad we could both move forward, that we could both find a way to heal and start anew." As we walked through the complex, I could see the weight of our shared history bearing down on him. He knew that I had every right to hate him, to want revenge for the pain and suffering he had caused me. But I had chosen a different path, one of forgiveness and understanding. "You know, I used to think that forgiveness was a weakness," I said as we stepped out onto the rooftop pool deck. "But now I realize that it's a strength, a sign of true character. It takes courage to let go of the past, to move forward with an open heart and mind." He nodded, his eyes cast out over the city below. "I don't know what I would have done without you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You gave me a chance to rebuild my life, to start anew. I'll never be able to repay you for that." I placed a hand on his shoulder, feeling a sense of compassion and understanding. "You don't have to," I said. "Just keep moving forward, keep pushing yourself to be the best version of yourself. That's all any of us can do." As we stood there, looking out over the city, I realized that our journey was far from over. There were still lessons to be learned, still challenges to be overcome. But I was ready, armed with the knowledge and experience of my past. And I knew that no matter what lay ahead, I would face it with courage and determination, with a heart full of forgiveness and a spirit of resilience. I still remember the countless nights I spent sleeping in my car, counting pennies just to make ends meet. The feeling of uncertainty, of not knowing where my next meal would come from or where I'd lay my head at night. It was a weight that pressed down on me like a physical force. But it was in those moments of struggle that I found a reservoir of resilience within myself that I never knew I had. Looking back, I realized that my adversity was not just about the external circumstances that I faced, but also about the internal battles that I waged with myself. The struggle to stay positive, to keep pushing forward even when everything seemed lost, was a daily fight. But with each passing day, I grew stronger, my resolve hardened, and my determination became unshakable. My experiences have also had a profound impact on my relationships. I've learned to appreciate the people who stood by me during my darkest moments, who offered a listening ear, a comforting word, or a helping hand. And I've also learned to recognize the people who were absent, who turned a blind eye to my struggles, or who took advantage of my vulnerability. But perhaps the most profound impact of my adversity has been on my worldview. I used to take things for granted, to assume that life would always be easy, that success would always be within reach. But my struggles taught me that nothing is certain, that life can change in an instant, and that success is often the result of hard work and perseverance. As I sit here today, in my luxury apartment, I'm reminded of the incredible journey that I've been on. The same landlord who once evicted me from my home now pays rent to live in one of my properties. It's a surreal experience, one that I never could have imagined when I was at my lowest point. But this isn't just about revenge or triumph. It's about the legacy of adversity. It's about the lessons that I learned, the strength that I gained, and the perspective that I developed. My adversity has taught me to be more empathetic, more understanding, and more compassionate. It's taught me to appreciate the struggles of others, to recognize the humanity in everyone, and to strive to make a positive impact on the world. And so, as I look back on my journey, I realize that my adversity has been a blessing in disguise. It's been a teacher, a mentor, and a guide. It's shown me that life is precious, that every moment is a gift, and that every experience is an opportunity for growth and transformation. As I sit in my office, surrounded by the familiar comforts of success, I am reminded of the long and winding road that brought me here. From the depths of despair, sleeping in my car and counting pennies, to the pinnacle of triumph, where the same landlord who once evicted me now pays rent in my luxury apartments. It's a story that I've shared with you, but one that still takes my breath away. As I reflect on the journey that has been my life, I am struck by the realization that it's not about the destination, but about the person you become along the way. The struggles, the setbacks, the failures, they're all part of the process, shaping and molding you into the person you're meant to be. My story is a testament to the power of human resilience. It's a reminder that no matter how dark things may seem, there is always hope. There is always a way forward. And it's a reminder that the only way to truly fail is to give up. I think back to the days when I felt like I was at the bottom of the barrel, when it seemed like the world was against me. But I refused to let my circumstances define me. I refused to let my struggles break me. Instead, I used them as fuel to drive me forward, to push me towards a better tomorrow. And now, as I look around at the life I've built, I am filled with a sense of pride and accomplishment. I am proud of the person I've become, proud of the obstacles I've overcome, and proud of the success I've achieved. But as I sit here, basking in the glow of my triumph, I am also reminded that it's not just about me. It's about the people who have been inspired by my story, who have been motivated to keep pushing forward, even in the face of adversity. My journey has taught me that revenge is not about hurting others, but about rising above them. It's about taking the negative experiences of your life and turning them into something positive. It's about using the pain of your past to fuel the success of your future. As I close this chapter of my life, I am filled with a sense of gratitude and appreciation. I am grateful for the struggles, for the setbacks, and for the failures, because without them I wouldn't be the person I am today. And as I look to the future, I am excited to see what's next. I am excited to see how my story will continue to unfold, how it will continue to inspire and motivate others. And I am excited to see how I can continue to use my experiences to make a positive impact on the world. My journey has come full circle, but it's far from over. In fact, it's just beginning. And I'm honored to have you along for the ride.